dedicated speakers, mentors, and most importantly, our students who are the next generation of global talent. With that, I would like to introduce you to Adiba Chaudhry, the current president of Global Mobility Club, a student organization tasked to support global talent and mobility initiatives at UT Dallas. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Professor Zadorek. Give me just a moment so I can share my screen. All right. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here today. Thank you for that introduction, Professor Zadorek. My name is Adiba Chaudhry, a senior in the Global Business Department. I'm also the president of UT Dallas's first ever Global Mobility Club, or GMC for short. In this quick presentation, I'm going to give you guys a brief introduction on our values and mission, our goals, and our next steps for next semester. So just to start us off, I'd like to introduce the GMC leadership team. As the founding members, the first semester has been full of collaborative efforts in outlining our organization's scope, creating executive calendar of events that can be used in all future events, and planning an executive calendar for events and conferences just like this one. As you can see with all of our diverse backgrounds and major specialties, we really hope to bring global mobility's purpose in action. So what is our mission? Our mission is to bring awareness of the global mobility industry to UT Dallas, as well as students at the Naveen Jindal School of Management. As you all know, company employees that are chosen to take part in international assignments need strong support provided by their human resource departments and other service providers. Global mobility is also a part of a lot of other fields like tax, training, relocation, legal and immigration, cultural sensitivity teams, the list goes on. While most of you already know this, and while global mobility affects so many companies, we notice that a lot of UTD students don't even realize that the global mobility sector by name exists, or that it's a potential career path for them. And we realize there's a really big demand to bring the sector to the attention of UTD students that might not even know all the moving parts that go into international relocation and its related jobs. So as UTD opens back up in person for the fall 2021 semester, what have we been working on? Our first goal is to deliver events related to global mobility and talent. So these are things like semester case competitions to assist real life companies, discussion panels, as well as corporate and non-corporate events alike. All of those are in the works. Our second goal is to build meaningful professional relations with other students, not only at UT Dallas, but with student ambassadors around the world. And as mentioned earlier, we'd also like to facilitate conversation on global talent needs for employers around the world and engage in inquiring about local internships related to global mobility, international internships, and global management trainee programs. Finally, and this might be the most important for many of you listening, we would like for our students to know and be known by industry mentors. This would range from Q&A with students to feedback on students' Global Mobility Club projects and research, to collaborating with us to provide events and consulting competitions during the semester. If participating in any of those capacities as a GMC industry mentor sounds like a rewarding experience, it is, but we would absolutely love to have your insights and industry acumen. If you're interested in joining our organization as a mentor, please reach out to our program director, Hubert Zadorek. I've listed his email down below. We've also created a GMC LinkedIn group. They'll be active from the fall 2021 semester. So definitely connect with us there. And there's also a QR code directly to the LinkedIn group. So you can definitely just use your phone camera and it'll take you directly to there, or you could just take a picture of this slide. And if you're a student interested in joining as a member, my contact information is in the bottom right. You can also take a picture of that and reach out to me so I can add you to the organization. Other than that, thank you for your time. And I hope you really enjoyed today's conference and the conference for the rest of the week. And now I'll be giving the spotlight to one of our leadership team members, Aya Abdulrahman, who will talk a little bit more about her past experiences.
Thank you, Adiba. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So today I'm going to introduce the JAM competition, case competition class, which I took last semester with Professor Zydoric. So in the class, it's divided into 7 teams, and each team is assigned a real-time issue as a case study project by industry specialists. Each team is also assigned a mentor from the industry to guide and add to their research along the way. We'll get more into mentoring later on in this presentation. Throughout the semester, we also had 6 webinars with industry leaders who added onto our knowledge in the field and topics that were relevant to our case studies. We continued researching, and at the end of the semester, we presented in front of a panel of 3 judges, and 3 top teams were selected to win a cash prize out of the class. So the purpose of this class is to build bridges connecting the global talent mobility industry and global business education programs. Here we have the top row is the mentors that help the students throughout the semester on their case study projects. They were very important to the project process. And then we have the webinar speakers who were featured throughout the semester and the panel of 3 judges. And then here we have the staff, including Professor Zydoric and Miss Letitia, who the students interacted the most with because they were our professors. So this case study class has a lot of benefits to both UTD students and the global mobility industry. For UTD students, we gain practical knowledge and insights on the global human resource management. We have great mentoring and networking opportunities through this class and professional development opportunities. On the other hand, the mobility industry gets fresh perspectives for some of the most pressing industry issues from the students firsthand. They also get analysis and recommendations raised from a new perspective and partnering with with a prestigious business school. And here we have some reviews from students as well as mentors. We've gotten a lot of feedback from this class that it's a greater learning experience than being in a classroom setting. It's very interactive. It's also a great networking opportunity. And now I'm going to introduce Jenny and April. They're going to talk about the JAM case study project from a student's perspective.
So hello everyone, my name is Jenny, and my perspective with the IMS 4330, the Global HR Management class. My classmate and I, we were very lucky to have the opportunity to work with and learn from a lot of industry leaders who are expert in the global mobility industry. And every week we have online webinar to hear from the industry expert sharing the insight about current business situation and how their company create business plans to accommodate employees during the pandemic time. It was eye-opening to learn many ways the company can smartly strategize their new business model to work effectively with shareholders, clients, and their employees. And within the global mobility, we learn how companies handle expatriation process for their employees who are working abroad. And these information are so valuable to us as we're all learning how to work effectively in this unexpected pandemic situation. In addition, my classmate and I were split into several teams working on different global HR topics for a case study competition. And, excuse me. And I was assigned to group 5, and I worked with 5 fellow classmates who was very inspiring to learn from as well. And our topic was, in the space of advocacy, identify the top 3 policy positions that the mobility community, the service provider, and the corporate might want to consider as part of their 2021 plan. Fortunately, we had a wonderful mentor who guided us throughout the process and really helped us with our presentation. Our mentor helped us with some feedback and recommendation on the next step and what we should include in our research paper and presentation. And our mentor even helped us rehearse for the presentation and make sure we do our best for the big day. At last, we were honored to have won the case study competition along with Dustin and Aya team. We were so proud that we worked very hard to achieve such results. So my class with this, my experience with this class was very unforgettable. We learned so much from Director Zydoric, Miss Letitia, the industry leader, and even from each other. So through this journey, I made more friends and gained valuable teamwork experience that will help me prepare for the corporate world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenny. At this time, we're getting ready for to introduce our speaker for today. It is my pleasure to introduce Shankar Raman, who is the Senior Director of Human Capital and Benefits from Towers Wells Watson. Mr. Raman?
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Hey,
can hear
Hubert,
you
good
well.
to see you.
Great to see you as well.
Excellent. So, would you like me to start, Hubert? How would you?
The floor is yours.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Hubert, and the rest of the team at the Jindal School of Management. It gives me great pleasure to be, sharing this panel with all of you, and to be talking about return to work, or the next normal, or whatever it is that we end up calling it. When Professor Zierderek reached out and said, "Hey, what would you like to talk about?" And I said, there are so many ways we could take this, and we thought it'd probably make more sense for us to spend some time talking about, as companies start thinking about preparing for the next normal, or reopening, shall we say, returning to the workplace. How should they be thinking about it, and what are some of the implications for talent management, for human resources, and for practitioners as well as consultants, as well as people who are going to be thinking about global talent mobility. What are the answers are still being shaped, but I think just getting a better sense of some trends to consider would be a good place for us to start. And so what I'll do in my session today will be to share with you, what are some of the things that we see from Willis Towers Watson's perspective. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Willis Towers Watson, we're a global professional services company, and we've been in the human capital consulting space for close to 100 years. And we do a wide range of consulting work in the space, and we've also been doing a fair amount of research as it relates to COVID response and the future of work. In fact, one of the things I specialize in is in this area of future of work and future of working, so to speak. And so I will now spend a few minutes talking about what are we seeing in the marketplace, and what that means for I guess everybody, pretty much, whether you're a student or whether you're working somewhere. I think being aware of all of these things is going to be important. As you're a student, you're probably thinking about, are we going to be having classes open permanently or not? I know many of you are back in classes full time. What if there's a COVID-3, or a fourth wave, or if there are new virus variants, particularly for folks who are international students, they're badly affected, particularly for those coming from India, for example. So, or if you're, working in a company with a global footprint, you're thinking about how do we navigate this world? Those are some of the questions many of our clients are asking us. And so I'll share with you, our perspectives. First, are you able to see my screen, Hubert? I just want to confirm. If you could.
Yes, we are. Yeah, if you can
Great,
put it
excellent.
in the presentation mode, that would be great. Excellent.
Perfect. So, and I know there's a chat feature on this one, so I'll periodically stop, and if someone doesn't mind just monitoring the chat to see any questions come through, I'm happy to take questions. Feel free to stop me and ask questions. We have about an hour or so for discussion, so feel free to. I'm hoping that this would not just be a lecture, but more of a conversation amongst all of us. Now, we know that the pandemic, as it started last year in the winter of 2019 or early 2020, it's had a profound human toll. It's had an economic toll. It's had a huge health toll on pretty much everybody on the planet. And many companies are now beginning to recover from the toll that it has taken. Now, some companies have done really well also in this environment. So depending upon the impact that the pandemic has had on you, there are two broad categories of questions that people are wondering from a business perspective. If we've not done so well, particularly if you're in the hospitality business, or if you're in the transportation business, or the travel and tourism business, or the restaurant business, you're thinking about how do we recover? How do we get back to a footing that reflected something around what we were in 2019, and how do we become more profitable? Or if you've been doing really well, like the providers of the technology we're using, which is Zoom, right? you're asking a question on how do we sustain our performance? What happens if DoorDash is a great example, right? So DoorDash became really popular as people started ordering more and more in. But now, as probably people start eating out a little bit more and start ordering a little less, they're considering how do we sustain our performance? What do we need to do to make ourselves more successful than what we have been, and not just be a kind of a pandemic wonder, so to speak? In that context, people are also asking questions that fall into four big categories. One is, how do we think about how work gets done and where it gets done? Because not everybody can work in the same way that they could. The second question people are asking is the workplace. What does the role of the workplace look like in the future? Will it have the same kind of role that it did in the past? And if we have a good chunk of our workforce working from a hybrid fashion, what does that mean for our culture? And then the final category of questions around employee well-being. If we have half our workforce working from home, half our workforce working from the office, and we don't really know the virus has fully gone away and people are working longer hours, what does that mean for employee well-being? We know from our research, and I'll share statistics in a moment, and other people's research, that well-being is a big concern. Now, all of this is a bit of an unknown. The unknown factor here is the fact that there are new virus variants coming up. Many people don't want to get not popular, I'm sorry, we don't want to get vaccinated. People are concerned about, hey, how do we, if you're a global company, how do we make sure we are globally consistent, at the same time meeting local market needs? And what does all of this mean from a talent strategy perspective, right? How do we make sure we think about a culture? I mean, there's a myriad of questions coming up, the answers for which are unknown. And as companies start preparing for the future, we think there are 10 trends that they need to be aware of, whether, no matter which industry you're in. Now, not all of these trends will impact you equally, but there are 10 trends that people need to be thinking about as they start preparing for the future. One, hybrid is here, whether you like it or not. I think employees, there's a time when people said, oh, the whole world is going to go remote. And people realized quickly, well, no, that's not going to happen because people don't really like working remote fully. At the same time, employees are saying loudly and clearly, we don't want to come back into work every day. We do want to come back to work, but not every day. And so this notion of remote, whether it's a few days a week, whether it's a few weeks a year, or whether it is periodic, whatever it is, some roles permanently remote, etc. Many companies are experimenting with different options, but hybrid is here to stay. So that's trend number one. And so thinking about what that means for the leaders, for employees, is going to be important. That has a big question around the role of the workplace. So that's trend number two. There is a shift in the role of the office from a space where people could gather as a community as well as do individual work to more collaborative type work. People are going to focus the office more to collaboration, learning, and innovation. And we see that trend happening already in quite a few places. Dropbox is a company that announced that they're going to do away with corporate real estate as it used to exist in the past, and now focusing more on creating what are called collaborative studios. And as more companies start announcing that, hey, you could actually work from home permanently, it's causing a question around what will the office do. Salesforce is another company in Silicon Valley. For those of you familiar with San Francisco, Salesforce Tower is a huge office building. And now only 80% of that Salesforce space is going to be utilized because only 20% rather, 80% of the workforce there is going to be working from home on an ongoing basis, periodically at least. Third trend, therefore, is as people start working remotely, there's going to be an acceleration of digitization. And what that means is not just using Zoom or Teams or whatever platform you have. It is an increased use of virtual collaboration tools, no doubt, but an acceleration of robotics, of artificial intelligence, of machine learning, of augmented reality and virtual reality, the use of avatars, and importantly, the rise of data science and analytics using AI and ML aggressively, because we are all leaving a digital footprint. The notion of organization network analysis is going to become more and more prevalent as people start leaving bigger digital footprints. Microsoft came out with some research a few weeks ago that basically said they found, based on how people are spending their time on Teams, that on one hand, teams are people are developing new networks. On the other hand, people are beginning to feel more disconnected as well in some ways. So some other networks were being broken. And so I think the use of digital capability, shall we say, in new ways than what we had not imagined before, is going to become more prevalent. Now, one thing that the pandemic has done, as all of you will probably, whether you're a student or a working person, you will testify to this, I imagine, is you're spending more time in front of a screen, 12 by 13 screen or whatever screen you might have in front of you. You're spending more time. That's also clear, and you feel like you're working longer hours. And our data, as well as everyone else's data, is that says that, look, stress and well-being are becoming really critical concerns for many organizations. And so there's going to be a shift in the conversation around well-being, shifting from wellness, so to speak, to holistic employee well-being, where well-being is treated in an integrated fashion as a focal point for human capital strategy. Number 5, diversity, equity, and inclusion are going to become even more important than they have ever been before. And the reason for that is the pandemic has shown that people of color, women, people in caregiving roles, people of different health conditions are all at greater risk. And for the next few years, as we know it, some of those conditions are changing immensely. Along with the issue around racial challenges in the country as well, making sure that we are creating a workplace in which we don't unwittingly or unintentionally cause some diversity and inequity issues, shall we say, is going to be an important consideration for most organizations. Now, the 6th trend to be aware of is that, as people start working more and more remotely, or people start working in a hybrid fashion, there's going to be an ongoing narrative around what does performance mean in this new environment. Is it about showing up in the office? Many people are used to assessing performance when you see somebody performing, right? I know somebody is doing well because I see them doing well, or performing or working very hard. Well, sometimes you can't see them. So how do you know they're doing what they're expected to do, or they're achieving the outcomes that they're expected to achieve? And that's where, for many organizations, there'll be a redefinition of performance where the focus is on impact as well as on values. Now, that's a thing that's going to be really important for organizations is, in an environment in which people are working remotely, you want good collaborators. You want people who not only get work done, but are also able to collaborate extensively with their team members. And so thinking about how are people showing up even when they're remote, are they collaborating, are they enabling their team members to succeed, is going to become a critical component of the conversation around performance. The next trend to be mindful about is the fact that this is going to require potentially new managerial skill sets. Historically, most managers made their power around by monitoring KPIs, by ensuring tasks were being performed. We believe there's going to be the emergence of a new manager model where managers are going to have to spend more time on things like performance coaching, on connecting and collaborating, and making sure that their employees are able to embrace the change that is being required of them. And so the prevalence of a new manager model is also going to put a pressure on thinking about requirements around new talent fundamentally. Now, I'll hit number 9 and then come back to number 8. We should have flipped the order around, actually. There is a new talent equation emerging, and this is really critical for talent mobility. The gig economy will no doubt play a bigger role. We have many people who've gone into the gig economy, either by choice or not by choice. But the reality is that people have access to gig workers and gig talent more so than they ever did. But also now, as companies start thinking about a hybrid workforce, right, there is a greater opportunity for them to identify non-traditional sources of talent. So we've had clients, for example, who've never looked at non-traditional sources, Atlanta, for example, for looking at talent, or tech talent, or Dallas, or other places where you've had some tech talent, but the cost of living is so different from San Francisco. Many employers who used to be in the San Francisco Bay Area are now wondering, should we not be looking at other sources for tech talent at potentially a lower cost, and one in which employees do not have to move as well. Now, number 8, climate change is going to be a critical driver as well. And why do we say this? We saw a few days ago, the Biden government announced that climate change is going to be a big priority for this administration. And even before that, though, many investors are asking questions about their investee companies. What are you doing with regards to climate change? BlackRock came and announced that they are suggesting that all their portfolio companies should be having some kind of net zero goals. And hundreds of companies around the world have signed up for net zero goals, essentially saying that their carbon footprint will be more than what what it is today, the very minimum, and be lower than what it is today, and that their contribution to global warming will be zero, frankly. And so, and boards are taking an interest in this, and so executives are being incented in this, and employees are being expected to become more aware of this, and talent will choose to work in organizations that actually have climate change as a priority, and may choose not to work in organizations that don't have climate change as a priority. Number 10 is probably the most important in all of this, in this entire page, which is companies will start becoming even more intentional about culture than they have been in the past. And the reason for that is, if you think about culture as a sum of the mindset, the assumptions that people have, of the behaviors that people are expected to display, of the experiences that employees are expected to have, and the enablers that drive this experience, companies that thrive in the next normal are going to be those who are intentional about their culture, who are able to help their leaders question their existing assumptions, who are able to help their employees and managers develop new behaviors, who are able to actually drive new experiences and make employee experience the center of their overall focal point. Those are the ones who are going to be thriving in this new normal. So these 10 trends from our perspective are going to be really critical as we have any conversation about talent management, or about global mobility, or about business strategy itself. Now, we know that hybrid work or flex work used to exist even before the pandemic started. Well, why is it so different, and what's different about it now, right? So we know that flex work existed before the pandemic started because 14% of employees work from home. But in 2021, 52% of employees were expected to work from home, which is 3 times the number of what was working before the pandemic, right? Now, what's happened is also people are beginning to feel more disconnected, right? So the challenge for leaders is to figure out, how do we help employees feel more connected to the workplace and to their colleagues? People are working longer hours. At the same time, they are feeling challenged. They're feeling distracted at home, particularly working fathers, for example, right? People do want to have a better work-life balance, because you don't want to be spending 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Zoom calls every day, right? Yet they prefer remote working because they feel it gives them a little bit more flexibility. If you're like me, you definitely agree with that. As a consultant, I used to travel 200 days a year, and right now I have traveled 0 days in the last 365 days or so, and I'm really enjoying it, but I'm spending a lot of time in front of computer screens. People are realizing that therefore they're going to have to make changes to how they think about pay and benefits in retirement. People are spending, reporting more anxiety and depression. They're asking questions about, how do we think about retirement as well? Should we be providing more employee assistance programs in ways that they haven't done before also? And finally, we are learning from our work that employees do want choice. And Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb, had said this really well. Hybrid working or flexible working, the future is going to be driven by employees, not by employers. And so as employees start getting more of a choice, and the world is getting to be really flat as regards to where work gets done, people will start having a choice as to where they might want to take their capabilities. And this is particularly true even more for underrepresented cohorts, who can make choices as to who they want to go to work to. So, now, how do you thrive in this environment? Step 1 would be to rethink how you think about flexible work or hybrid work. And the fact that it's not a program, most companies have treated this as a program in the past. We believe flexible working is a combination of capability and culture that empowers employees and employers to achieve their work and business objectives while driving better experience. And doing this well is going to drive competitive advantage for companies both in the product marketplace and in the talent marketplace. I know situations where many employers, frankly, have lost employees because they were not able to provide the same degree of flexibility that someone down the road could. And I kid you not, someone down the road could for a client of ours in the Northeast region because of the way they were set up, because of tax incentives that have been set up, etc. They could not afford to provide employees with the same degree of flexibility. And so a few employees decided to leave and go down to the employer down the road because they could get more flexibility. And so that means that this particular employer lost out on critical talent. And so how you orchestrate this whole capability is going to become really critical for organizations. And how do you do this? There are 7 elements that we think that employers will need to address in an intentional manner, right? So we talked about organizational culture, but employers will need to be focusing on building up manager and employee capability. Do they have the skill sets and behaviors to work in a flexible or hybrid environment? Do they understand the norms of communication? Do they understand the lateral and the sideways and the upwards and downwards communication required to thrive in this environment? Do they understand the tools that they can use to engage with one another? How to drive collaboration? How do you create communities? Hierarchical management is going to become more challenged in this new environment. And frankly, leadership through influence is becoming more and more important. Like I said earlier, manager skill sets will be challenged quite a bit. Managers who connect and collaborate will become more successful in this environment. That means companies are also going to have to be rethinking and making sure that processes, tools, and technology are supportive of employee needs and driving the right employee experiences. And in some cases, work and jobs will need to be redesigned in order to thrive, in order to help employees thrive in this new environment. And that has implications, therefore, for how you think about talent as well. Obviously, having some clarity as to policy and programs is going to be important, but clarity as to governance is going to be important. When I say governance, I'm referring to things like who's going to decide who's going to be in hybrid? Who's going to decide should an employee's pay be changed? Should managers be left to their own discretion? How do you make sure some managers don't treat some employees unfairly? Those kinds of things are really critical, and they can eat at the fabric of an organization. Then when you have employees working in a hybrid fashion, there are concerns around career inequities coming in, right? There's research that shows that people who work in the office actually get promoted at twice the rate as those who do not work in the office. So how do you make sure that that kind of an environment doesn't exist? And how do you therefore readjust employee rewards to in a way in which that career inequity and pay inequity doesn't exist also, or benefits inequity, right? So if you're providing some benefits to somebody in the office, but not providing those benefits to someone at home because they work from home, does that create some challenges? Does that create different kinds of mindsets and citizens in the organization? Those sound like trivial things, but when you start implementing these kinds of hybrid working abilities, which is going to be prevalent from our perspective, it's going to really challenge organizations. And probably one of the biggest areas that we see companies struggling with is driving leadership capability to thrive in this. Leadership mindset and capability tends to drive how the rest of the organization behaves. And so leaders becoming more self-aware and making conscious choices of putting the needs of the company and needs of the employee on the same level and trying to make the right trade-offs is going to be really, really critical. And making some hard choices and being open to shifting their existing assumptions is an area that we see companies struggling with also. Doing this well will allow organizations to create this capability that's going to allow them to succeed in the future. One thing I did want to point out is when you think of hybrid working, it's not just about when and where. It's not just about where work is, and I'm sorry. It's about when you get work done and who does that work. So, flexible work or hybrid work is as much about when and who as it is about where you get work done. And this is a big shift that companies have to make. It's just because it seems to us that a job cannot be performed from home. Maybe there's other ways to think about flexibility. And that has some implications for who you think about who the talent is going to be and how you think about mobility as well then. If you create some shift flexibility, for example, or job sharing flexibility, it could allow you to create talent that you attract talent you had not thought of before. It could allow you to also drive some mobility in areas that you had not considered before also. And that's why I think thinking about a hybrid working and flexible working from a holistic perspective is going to be really critical. One slide, and then I'll pause for questions and reactions and see if anything comes through in the chat. Employee experience, as I mentioned earlier, will be a central tenet of any hybrid work strategy. Listauss Watson likes to think of employee experience as being the sum total of all the touch points that an employee has in the organization. And what we find from our research is this 12-tile slide, effectively that the drivers of employee experience are reflected in these 12 tiles. Questions that employees are asking when they are thinking about experiences: do I understand how I fit into the organization and I get to do what I get to do? Do I understand, what kind of an organization structure do we have? Are we efficient? Are we flexible? Do we have decision making made faster? Do I feel that I'm being rewarded fairly for my performance? And do I feel I'm being supported appropriately? And do I have a good boss? These are some of the essential things that people need to have in order to feel that they're having a great experience in the organization. So, we like to think of it in terms of these 4 categories of purpose items, of experience items. One is purpose. Second is around the kind of work people are doing. Third is, are they getting rewarded for the kind of work that they're doing? And fourth is, are they able to work with good quality, high quality people that they like to work with? So all of these things, 4 things, contribute to what we call high performing talent experience. And the best performing companies actually differentiate on these elements that you see on the top of the page around inspiration, around drive, around growth, and around trust. And so as we think about hybrid working, as we think about a future of working environment, as we think about driving greater talent mobility in the future environment where you may not have 100% of the workforce working in the office, how do you create programs that drive this kind of talent experience is going to be really important tenet for any kind of talent mobility program that a company envisages. Now, I talked about how different companies are approaching this. And this is a slide that encapsulates some of the challenges associated with this. Many companies have adopted flexible working, hybrid working, right? Google's come out with it. Goldman Sachs, on the other hand, is struggling with it. Their CEO has said, hybrid working is not the thing for us. We have an apprenticeship model. On the other hand, Dropbox has said, like I said, everyone's going to work in remotely. Twitter has said that as well. Many chemical companies have come out and said we'll have hybrid working. On the other hand, the founder of Netflix, Reed Hastings, has come out and said we're going to get a majority of people vaccinated, then we'll be back in the office. Now, many tech startups have come out and said, yesterday, today's Wall Street Journal said, in fact, that tech startups are trying to get their employees back into the office as well. And so, thriving in this hybrid world is not easy. Each company has taken an approach that they think is going to make more sense for it. And the opportunity for leaders is to think about what makes most sense for them. What we find is that companies have taken one of these 4 approaches. One is they stay close, where employees can move as long as they're within a commutable distance from the office. Second would be where employees will move as long as they move to a state in which the company is an office hub. A third option is where employees can work anywhere nationally. So if you had an office in San Francisco, you could go sit in Wyoming or Montana and enjoy the beautiful air out there and continue to do work. And we've actually had colleagues, or you could go to beautiful Santa Fe and get work done, right? The fourth option is where you don't ask and you don't tell. People can work anywhere they want. Don't tell anybody. This obviously has implications for how you think about compensation and benefits. The question is, why does all of this matter in terms of talent mobility and talent strategy, right? And I'll come to that in a moment. But before I proceed, any questions in the chat, Hubert? I just want to make sure that I answer any questions that may have come up so far.
Yes, Shankar, there is a question from our own Mike Peng, professor within organization strategy and international management here. Can you show some specific company examples that really do well along one or a few of the dimensions for the 7 key elements for hybrid work?
Yeah. So quite a few companies increasingly now, right? So, at the same time, I will say that many companies are learning. So the reality is everybody is learning. So we had a conference and this guy from Intel told us that, look, we're learning as everybody is going. One of the companies that I think is really taking the deep strides out here is Microsoft, for example, right? So Microsoft is investing heavily in technology tools to enable virtual collaboration. They're actually investing heavily in organization culture. One of the things that they've done is shifted to, over the last 4 years, and this happened even before the pandemic, but their culture focus has enabled them in the pandemic. Thinking about how do they create a culture, shift the culture from know-it-alls to learn-it-alls, right? So, which is what Satya Nadella's favorite phrase has been, creating safety for people to ask questions, creating a growth mindset. And so, they've been working very heavily on things like, how do we enable managers and employees to make sure that they're able to work successfully no matter where they're located? The other technology company that is increasingly making more and more space around this is Salesforce.com, right? So Salesforce is actually intentionally working towards creating the right kind of culture that's actually supporting employees to work remotely. Now, on the manufacturing side and on the less traditional technology side, I guess Nike is an example of a company. It's not manufacturing; it's fast-moving consumer goods. They are working aggressively to actually creating new ways of working, redefining their culture norms. Companies such as Takeda Pharmaceuticals, for example, the pharmaceutical sides, working very proactively. Then this is a unique situation where they're unique because they're a Japanese company. Japanese companies are not known for flexible work. They're one of the first Japanese companies to actually announce flexible work as a policy, even before the pandemic hit. And once the pandemic hit, they've been working aggressively on trying to redefine their cultural norms about where and how work can get done. So hopefully, those are examples of companies that they give you a sense of who's doing what in the space. Obviously, every company is in a bit of a journey right now and learning as they're going along.
Wonderful, thank you. Do you have any examples of companies that don't do well in this space?
Lots of them. I'm sorry. Yeah, no. Look. There are almost every company is struggling a little bit in some aspect of this other, right? So, which is how do you deal with well-being? How do you stress is a big issue in the gaming and technology industry. So, how do you make employees feel supported? Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a big challenge for almost every employee, right? Financial services companies, have struggled with this quite a bit, actually, because they have this mindset that, hey, we want to be in the office to get work done. Netflix has struggled a little bit. Now, I would be really careful because in what I say, but at the same time, the recent stock price tank has suggested, look, companies that have put a lot of premium on creativity and collaboration and innovation work have struggled a little bit in this space. No.
Wonderful, thank you.
Sure thing. Coming back to this, right? So we talked a little bit about the fact that people are trying different things. Now, in the new world, we talked a little bit about how the workplace is changing. And this slide is meant to reflect the fact that, drill down that point a little bit deeper, which is historically, the workplace was where everybody went to for different reasons, right? It was the primary work location. You had a sense of identity. You connected with it. you created community. You also had economic value. Many people, particularly if you lived in Asia and other places, like, it's tough to, work from home productively in many countries around the world, because you don't have air conditioning, or your electricity doesn't hold up, or you have bad internet connection. Frankly, you don't like working from home, and so you want to go to the office because the air conditioning is great. And you have better seating, and you have better. If you lived in countries like Hong Kong and Singapore, where the apartments tend to be small, it's tough to do collaborative work meaningfully in those kinds of locations. So you went to the office to, for so many different reasons. And what we are seeing, at least in many locations now, increasing questions being asked around what is the role of the office going to be? Should we allow people to actually work from home more so? I know in the pandemic in India right now, a good chunk of, almost all my colleagues, for example, in India are working from home, and almost all our clients are working from home as well. But even in, our country right now, there's questions being asked about the role of the office, and where we believe that the shift is from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. There's going to be greater focus on collaboration, innovation, non-portable type of work. You also want to create connection. You want to create social learning and development, and you want to provide employees with some choice. And so, this is going to raise questions around things like, what is the operating model? We had a client that actually said, hey, maybe now that the location of the office doesn't matter, maybe we can create some new centers of excellence in Eastern Europe that we had not considered before. Maybe we can create some new centers of excellence in the Philippines that we had not considered before. So the operating model, i.e. location of capabilities, questions around centralization versus decentralization is becoming really, really critical. The other thing that the pandemic has done is that the experience of the world is so varied that it's difficult to say that what exactly happened in Italy or in the UK is easily portable across to the US or to other markets. What that means is there's a greater need now for understanding what decisions need to be centralized versus what decisions should be ideally be decentralized, so people closer to the customer can make those decisions. And so there's a question around companies are asking around their operating model. Not everybody is necessarily asking that, but increasingly many companies are asking that. There's also, therefore, a question on location strategy about where we have offices and where we don't. I've actually have a client right now where they've had their office historically in New York, and they're wondering, well, maybe we don't need the same office space we had in New York. Maybe we actually have our workforce a little bit more distributed around the country. This has questions around there for the talent strategy, how you source them, how you engage them, how you build them, how you deploy them, and how you develop them. A classic example would be in talent management, succession planning for top talent often required that the people identified as successors undertake international assignments as a rotation to prove their merit, right? So now the question is, if you really can't send somebody off on an international assignment, go fix a problem in Southeast Asia or in Africa, right, and prove your merit and come back and we'll make you a contender for the CEO role, that's not going to happen anymore as easy as it used to. So how do you think about talent, that environment, and how do you think about succession planning capabilities is an ongoing conversation. Obviously, I won't belabor the point around technology strategy, but the workplace changing is raising questions around how do we think about our network infrastructure? How do we think about cybersecurity regime? How do we think about the kinds of mobile devices that people need to have? Is Zoom the best platform? Is Teams the best platform? Or is WebEx the best platform? And how do we make sure we are able to scale up as we start doing mergers and acquisitions? The other thing here is, as companies start increasing the pace of mergers and acquisitions. Now, for those of you who've been following deal data, you will notice that M&A deals fell off the cliff in the first 9 months of 2020. But then after that period, the pace of deal making has picked up tremendously, and we only anticipate that the pace of deal making is going to go through the roof by the end of this year. That's going to have implications for how you think about deal making and how you think about using technology that allows us to accelerate the way in which you do deals. Now, compound this with the fact that there's a rise in the use of automation, right? And we know from our research, as well as everybody else's research, we did some research at the World Economic Forum, that the human share of labor hours will go down from 71% to 58% by 2025. because of things like robotic process automation, because of machine learning, because of NLP. Now, what that means is that companies are having to develop new skill sets. And so some skill sets that used to be really important in the past are not going to be as important in the future. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to be completely irrelevant, but that means they're going to decline in importance. So, you could hire somebody in the past for, or today for things like creativity, originality, initiative. Some of those skill sets will become, equally important, but things like coordination and time management, things like scheduling, things like, hey, I'm going to hire somebody just because they can write well. That's not good enough for us. We're going to be having to have people who are going to be, frankly, good at analytical thinking. People, the softer skill sets. McKinsey came out with a report a few months ago, and so did we, that this whole notion of softer skill sets as a requirement for the future for success is going to become even more important as machines start taking on a number of jobs. Now, the pandemic has done is it slowed down some of these trends, but it hasn't, frankly, taken away these trends in any meaningful way. So from a talent perspective, what do we believe is going to happen? And this is really critical for talent mobility. Talent ecosystems of the future. People are going to have to be thinking about what is a talent ecosystem? What skill sets do we require as opposed to hiring for jobs? What are you going to, or hiring for specific roles? You're going to be hiring for specific skill sets, and you're going to be saying, hey, I'm going to take a body with certain skill set, utilizes for a job or for a particular project, and then have somebody else with another skill sets as an addendum to that skill set to make sure that we can actually be successful. The fact is that digitization and work reinvention is changing talent needs. And, as businesses start moving at a even faster speed than they have been in the past, and we know that, look, the companies that were in the S&P 500 or the largest market capitalization 10 years ago are not the same companies right now. And 20 years ago, completely different companies, right? So, competitive advantage can be easily lost. Ask Sony about it, right? Or ask General Motors about it, right? And so Tesla has a market leader position. Who knows? Maybe 5 years from now, Tesla may not be the market leader. And so now the pace of change is so high, and companies are realizing that the thing that's going to drive success is going to be thinking of talent ecosystems, thinking of skill set requirements, thinking of new mindsets. All of those things are going to require how you think about talent mobility. The notion of careers is evolving, right? People from our research, everybody else's research, many young generation, middle generation people are asking questions around, could we have more experiences in our life? Could we, instead of thinking of career progression as just promotions, could we actually be thinking about career experiences? Can we get time off to go deal with climate change? Can we get sabbaticals? And we have more project-based type work because we need to take care of parents, or because I really want to be able to go for a 2-month hike in the Himalayas or something of that sort. We know from our own experiences and other experiences, these kinds of requests are more often than not. And so the notion of careers as we know it is changing a little bit. Not that the traditional career is going to completely go to the window. Look, people will still have jobs, right? Companies will still hire for full-time roles. You guys are studying at the Jindal School of Management, so the demand for strong, analytically oriented skill sets, for jobs such as financial analysts, for marketing specialists, all of those demands will continue to be there. At the same time, because of the advent of technology, what we're finding is that the demand for skill sets within companies is changing the talent narrative and the career narrative in ways that many people are not fully prepared for. And what that means is that HR as an entity is going to have to be far more thoughtful and planful. And in fact, this is research that we had done on the World Economic Forum again a couple of years ago. We find 6 key, areas of focus for HR as a function in the future. One is HR is going to have to play a far more active role in developing new leadership capabilities for what we call the 4th industrial revolution. Second, HR is going to have to play a stronger role in the integration of technology in the workplace. It is not just going to be a challenge or problem for the IT function. No, HR is going to have to play a big role in making sure that people are able to use technology. The biggest challenge that many companies have is we spend, $25 million on Workday or SAP, but only we're using only 10, 15% of the functionality. Why? Because nobody has spent time enough on training and change management. Now, the digital capabilities become more and more prevalent, making sure HR is playing a role along with IT and finance, and integrating technology is going to be important. Related to that, doing it with the employee experience lens in mind is going to be critical. We already spoke of that a few minutes ago. Now, it's becoming increasingly clear that businesses become more complex, right? People who are competitors are now becoming collaborators. People who are collaborators are becoming competitors. You could be, competitors and collaborators into different markets, right? And so innovation is going to become an even more critical driver of success. Critical to all of that is going to be creating learning capabilities in the organization. And so the chief learning officer's role is going to become far more important than ever has been in the past, because you know how to going to drive competitive advantage through the learning capabilities you bring. At the same time, we're all used to Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram and every other social media where the experience is personalized, right? So if you go on, Joe can see exactly, the kinds of messages targeted towards him or her, right? And so how companies think about personalized learning cultures is going to be really, really important. Human capital is going to be expected to play a far bigger role in driving business agenda. The SEC came out with specific disclosures from a human capital perspective. They're going to be under the overall ESG umbrella and framework. And embedded in that is this whole notion of diversity and inclusion. Now, diversity and inclusion, as I said earlier, is going to be a critical driver, but almost everything we do in our business is going to have a diversity and inclusion lens. And this research is about 15 months old. I would add a 7 to say climate change is going to be embedded in what HR does as well. And HR is going to have to develop 4 mindsets, from our perspective: a value creator mindset, a designer mindset, an investor mindset, and a delivery mindset. And balancing all of these mindsets and figuring out when to use these mindsets in which context is going to be critical for a successful career in HR. And as a function, HR is going to have to fundamentally question some of its existing assumptions and create new roles, such as cultural advisors, digital HR lead, head of work reinvention, reskilling. Facebook has a big role called manager of contingent workforce, right? They have a head of future of work strategy as well also. And so some companies have created a chief purpose officer, right? And so the point I'm making out here is that as we think about talent mobility, there are a number of trends that are impacting, the whole narrative around talent. That has implications for how we think about talent mobility. That has implications for the role and the capabilities of HR. And as people start thinking about careers in this space or making changes, if you're a company, thinking about which of those trends are going to impact you how, and being intentional and thoughtful about it is going to be really important. So that is the end of my prepared speech, Hubert. I think I hit your target time that you gave me at 45 minutes past the hour. So we have 15 minutes for a conversation. Happy to take any questions people might have.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Shankar. Fantastic presentation. We have a few questions here from the audience, and I'd like to throw in a couple of mine as well. So let's start with the first question from the audience here. What are the new skills that are required for the students to have in order to embrace the employment trend in the future?
Sure, whether you like it or not. So one of the things I always encourage young people, and I'm having difficulty with starting my video for whatever reason. I click to start my video, but it is not starting. Oh, you can see my video?
Yeah, we can see you now. Yep.
Okay, great, excellent. So there are a few things. One, obviously, becoming more fluent with, digital technologies. Just everybody in every organization would have to have some degree of digital fluency to be able to use social media, to be able to use LinkedIn, to be able to, all of those things are almost fundamental requirements. is what I would say. The second thing I think is virtual collaboration. Whether we like it or not, it's going to be really critical for everyone to become master. And this is the challenge for young people, right? When you're in the office, you know who to connect to, you know how to show up, you know how to present. When you're not in the office, people are always concerned about how do I set up time? How do I make sure I'm not coming across too aggressively? How do I make sure that I manage meetings effectively? I think just being able to network, networking is going to be an even more important skill set for young people, frankly. And think of networking not as a bad thing, but think of it as a good thing, as something that creates value for you and for the other person. If that lens would be really, really valuable. Obviously, the other things around just being able to become more familiar with data analytics and sciences, being more familiar with database decision making, all of those things are going to become more critical for students also. So hopefully that gives a sense.
Absolutely. Sure. Thank you so much, Sankara. And this is something that over the past year, we've tried to actually emphasize to students in terms of virtual collaboration and networking when it comes to working on class projects. And we've seen a lot of challenges in the beginning as the pandemic started. We saw a lot of challenges in that realm, but as students started to work a lot more together started to get used to this environment, we're seeing a lot more engagement virtually, a lot more better presentation skills, better collaboration skills, and better networking behind the scenes. One of the things that we saw last year, and it was a lot of students were challenged with time management, because you are not sitting in class, you don't have the team behind you to help you manage your time. You have to do it on your own. So we are seeing a lot of those transitions to new skills.
Yeah, no, thank you for that.
We have one more question here. Can you explain more on how climate change can influence the HR decision in hiring?
Absolutely. So, what's happening is that climate change is becoming a big priority for corporations. And so, if you think about some of the big movements in climate change, many companies are making what are called carbon commitment. They want to have a carbon zero footprint environment where the contribution to greenhouse gas warming is, frankly, nullified, and they're putting in as much, into the atmosphere as they're taking out of the atmosphere. And so, if you think about how companies can achieve it, you could obviously rationalize your assets. You could modify your manufacturing capabilities, etc. At the same time, for companies to be actually driving real change in the climate space, you also need to have a culture that actually makes employees aware of climate change. And so HR has got a huge role to play in making employees aware of climate change and efforts that they can take at an individual level to support their climate agenda. So that's step number one. Step number two, practically speaking, from a rewards and compensation benefits perspective, for example, many companies are now thinking about, hey, should we be incenting people now to drive electric cars, for example? We'll have better subsidies for electric cars. Or should we be actually having subsidies for hybrid cars? Or the San Francisco Transportation Authority, in its annual plan, actually came out with a suggestion to Silicon Valley employers that they incent their employees to actually work from home 3 days a week and come to the office only 2 days a week. Why? In order to reduce the carbon footprint of the employees coming into the office, actually. And so another way that HR can actually drive is to make sure that incentives, metrics for directors and above, managers who actually can make a difference, they are tied to some kind of a climate objective also. And then the final thing that why HR can play a really meaningful role, particularly for younger people, is, and I actually had this conversation with a large technology company in Silicon Valley, where they said, our employees are asking us now is, what is our position on climate change? And if we don't feel that we have the right position, we won't actually work in this employer. And so making climate change as a critical part of the employee value proposition is another area that actually HR can play a very strong role. So think of it as driving value by making sure metrics are being set up the right way. Second, by making sure there's a a culture of climate consciousness. And third would be making sure that you're communicating it in the employee value proposition appropriately. So those are the three pillars for HR to drive climate change.
Great, thank you so much, Shankar. This aligns well with the message that we received last week during our first sustainability conference that we delivered at the University of Texas, Dallas. We brought in a number of sustainability leaders from large corporations who shared with us the need for not only sharing the sustainability as a way for delivering value, but also making sure that students are able to gain that sustainability mindset before they even are hired at corporations. So they propose that they work with us to understand what we need to do on our side to implement some of that sustainability mindset before they graduate and start working for companies that are driving that value through sustainability, through sustainable initiatives.
Hubert, so one point on that one, so that's a great point that he brought up. So another way HR can play a meaningful role is many companies are just now creating this office of sustainability, right? So from an org design perspective, what they tend to do is they have to have one person responsible for sustainability and hope that that person can make magic happen, right? Thinking about what is the right organization design and resources required for sustainability to be successful is also the HR responsibility. So that's another pillar for how HR can drive change in the space.
Wonderful. Do we have any other questions from the audience here? I'm scanning the Q&A box. In the meantime, if you could briefly, you mentioned intentional culture. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I'm just going to close this. The intentionality of culture means companies will have to be not let culture become an accidental outcome of the things that they do, and that means being planful for about what are the mindsets we want to have. So I'll give you a practical example, right? So Airbnb is a great example, right? So Airbnb made a big business assumption. Airbnb's business was badly affected last year when the pandemic hit, and then they were going to go for an IPO. But they postponed the date of the IPO because the market tanked. The business was not struggling; it was struggling big time. They didn't know what to do. So then they had to make some assumptions. They said, "Look, how is the business changing? Our business, we can assume that we will never have people traveling the same long distances that they did before and get an Airbnb. On the other hand, maybe we assume that people will actually be traveling short distances. People will still want to have a break, maybe driving distance from their homes." Right? So they reset their entire business assumptions, actually. And so that led to them also having them reset some of their, organization people assumptions about, how people can come to work, whether they can come to work or not, whether everybody can be in the office or not, right? They had to reset their assumptions about what drives people experiences. They had to reset their assumptions about how successful people can be at home while or working in the office, but not working in the office, etc. All of those things, led them to basically crafting out a statement of intent around what kind of organization they want to be, the kind of culture that they wanted to preserve, and the things that they had to change. And that led to a very successful IPO, fundamentally. And Google's another great example as well. There's a insurance company in the Pacific coast called Pacific Life. Actually, it's a 150-year-old insurance company. Almost every company that I've known has been doing this well have said, "Hey, we're making big business shifts. That is going to require our people to fundamentally reset some of their assumptions, redefine our behaviors about how we collaborate, or what is expected of us as leaders or managers." They make sure that they don't just let it to chance or assume that people will understand it, and they plan for the kind of organization, therefore, they want to create. So Lena Nair, the CHRO of Unilever, said this in a paper that culture is a new structure in some ways. I like to think of culture as being kind of the glue that's going to hold the organization even more in the future. And so being really planful about that, you can deal with structural issues easily if you have the right culture. But if you have the wrong culture, everything else will start falling apart, is what we find.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We have a
Definitely.
comment here from one of the attendees. I think the students are having a much stronger sustainability mindset than corporations currently do have. So this individual is looking forward to the generation change.
That is very true, and that person is very true. The younger generation is asking now questions around sustainability and climate change and what are corporations doing about it, and that's where corporations are to wake up and say, hey, our younger people are going to ask us questions, and so we better do something about it also.
Wonderful. With that, and this is the reason why we bring corporations to UT Dallas. This is why we bring corporations to share all this knowledge and expertise and the research, the industry research that you guys conduct with our students, and let our students know what's happening during this transition, so they are ready when all of this pandemic is over and they are ready to return to work. So I can't thank you enough for sharing all these best practices, all the changes, all the transitions that you are going through, your company is going through, and your clients are going through. And I think there's going to be a lot of follow-up questions in the future. I hope that you can continue to engage with UT Dallas and the Center for Global Business. And I truly thank you for your time today, Shankar.
No, thank you. It's been my pleasure. I've enjoyed the discussion, and hopefully it was helpful. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for inviting me. Be well, everyone. Be safe and be healthy.
Fantastic.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Have a great day.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. You too. Bye now.